listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to EPA WaterSense program's Make a Splash with Outdoor Water Savings Training. This is the third in our series of 6 technical webinars being put on as part of the Hotel Challenge training series. I'm Laura Wetzel, a supporting contractor to EPA's WaterSense program, and I'll be moderating this presentation. Before we get started, I'd just like to introduce the 3 presenters you'll be hearing from today. First, hosting this webinar is Tara O'Hare with the WaterSense program. Tara currently serves as the implementation and commercial outreach lead for WaterSense. She is responsible for program operations, partner support, and outreach to commercial and institutional facilities. Tara is currently managing the Hotel Challenge and was responsible for the release of WaterSense at Work, Best Management Practices for Commercial and Institutional Facilities, which you'll be hearing about more during this presentation. Our second speaker will be Holly Cannon with ERG. Holly is an environmental scientist who focuses on water efficiency in the commercial and institutional sector, and she's supporting contractor to WaterSense as well. Specifically, she conducts water use and conservation assessments and does water management planning for various clients. Works with WaterSense to develop technical specifications for recognizing water-efficient products, and assisted in publishing WaterSense at Work. Finally, we'll wrap up the presentation with a case study on water-efficient landscaping and irrigation at the resort at Pelican Hill, presented by Richard Restuccia, the Director of Water Management Solutions at ValleyCrest Companies, Inc. Richard serves on the Irrigation Association's Board of Directors and is a strong supporter of WaterSense. Richard has consulted with many private companies and public agencies concerning water management. He speaks nationally about water conservation and sustainability, and he is a regular contributor to Lawn and Landscape magazine on water topics. Richard also blogs and tweets about water regularly. Let's review a few housekeeping items before we begin. All attendees have been muted just to minimize background noise. But if you have a question during the presentation, please do type it into the chat box on the upper right-hand side of your screen. We'll have a dedicated time for Q&A at appropriate breaks throughout the presentation to address those questions. Lastly, we are recording this webinar for future viewing. You'll receive an email once it's posted on the WaterSense website, and when you do, please feel free to share the recording with any colleagues or business contacts that may benefit from it. Now, I'd like to invite Tara O'Hare to review the agenda for today and start us off with an introduction to WaterSense and the Hotel Challenge. Tara?
Thank you for those introductions, Laura, and welcome to all of you joining us today. As Laura mentioned, I'll start by providing a brief overview of the WaterSense program, the intent of the Hotel Challenge, and some rationale for why you might want to reduce water use at your hotel. Then we'll walk through water-efficient operation and maintenance practices, retrofit options, and replacement options for your landscape, irrigation systems, and pool and spas. Finally, Richard will discuss an exciting project he is part of at the resort at Pelican Hill in California. He'll go into detail about the practices and principles he and his team have implemented to reduce irrigation water use on the resort's landscaped areas. Once we've heard from Richard and taken questions on his talk, I'll quickly review what we learned in this webinar and talk about our upcoming trainings. So, for those of you who may not be familiar with WaterSense, I'll quickly introduce you to the program. WaterSense is a voluntary program launched in 2006 by EPA. We bring together a variety of stakeholders to promote water efficiency. Our main goal is to provide consumers with easy ways to save water, and we try to encourage innovation in manufacturing. Our end goal is to reduce water use and strain on water resources and infrastructure. The WaterSense label, which is displayed here on this slide, provides a simple way for consumers to identify water-efficient products, homes, programs, and practices. More than 11,000 different models of products have earned the WaterSense label to date. Products receiving the label have been independently certified for water efficiency and performance. To promote water efficiency outdoors, WaterSense labels certification programs for irrigation professionals. We've also developed a specification for weather-based irrigation controllers and are working on specifications for soil moisture sensors and landscape irrigation sprinklers. In addition to labeling products, homes, and certification programs for irrigation professionals, we try to approach water efficiency from many angles. We've developed best management practices for areas such as commercial buildings and landscapes to help facilities design, operate, and maintain their buildings and landscapes as efficiently as possible. WaterSense at Work is our best management guide for commercial facilities, and that is the focus of this training series. I mentioned earlier the irrigation products eligible for the WaterSense label and the products in our pipeline. This slide also shows other residential and commercial products eligible for the label. The label is generally reserved for products that use at least 20% less water and perform as well or better than their less efficient counterparts. Through 2012, WaterSense has helped consumers save a cumulative 487 billion gallons of water and over $8.9 billion in water and energy costs. We also work closely with our friends over at Energy Star, since water factors are included in many Energy Star specifications. To help commercial and institutional facilities understand, manage, and reduce water use, we developed WaterSense at Work. This guidebook includes best management practices on water management planning, water use monitoring and education, sanitary fixtures and equipment, commercial kitchen equipment, outdoor water use, mechanical systems, laboratory and medical equipment, and on-site alternative sources of water. Product and equipment-specific chapters in each of those main water use areas cover water-efficient operation and maintenance, retrofit, and replacement recommendations. WaterSense at Work also includes case studies that highlight the water, energy, and cost savings achieved by some of these commercial facilities who have implemented the BMPs. Now that we've released the BMPs and there are labeled products available, WaterSense is beginning to work with some commercial sectors individually to promote water efficiency. This year we're focusing on the hotel sector. This pie chart shows how water is typically used in hotels. As you can see, almost half of a hotel's water use comes from guest room sanitary use and hotel laundry. Outdoor water use for irrigation and pools and spas makes up the next largest portion of a hotel's typical water use. Hotels also use a significant amount of water in commercial kitchens and for building cooling and heating. So we know generally where hotels' water is being used, but why might you want to reduce that water use? First and foremost, saving water can help reduce operating costs. Water and sewer costs have been rising well above inflation for many years with no signs of slowing down. In addition, saving water can save the energy that is used to heat water, and it can improve equipment efficiency, which often reduces maintenance costs and man-hours required for repairs. We also have found that while this actually helps the hotels save water, it also helps reduce their bottom line and may increase their competitive advantage. A recent survey by TripAdvisor found that 79% of travelers place importance on choosing eco-friendly accommodations. You can also demonstrate leadership in your community, for example, by participating in programs such as the Hotel Challenge. WaterSense launched the Hotel Challenge on February 5th of this year to encourage and assist hotels in saving water. As part of the challenge, WaterSense will provide participants with tools to act, assess water use and savings opportunities, change products and processes to incorporate BMPs, and track water savings. Once your hotel takes the pledge on the WaterSense website, you'll receive emails that include several items to promote your participation, including our participant logo, a signed certificate of participation, and sample language to use in your in-room binders, websites, and guest service television. Every hotel that takes the pledge will also receive monthly water-saving tips and reminders about WaterSense webinars. The training webinar series, including this one, will walk through the BMPs in WaterSense at Work that are applicable to hotels, and each training will feature a case study showing how hotels have implemented these specific measures. Later in the spring, WaterSense will release its water use and savings evaluation tool, the water use tool, which will help hotel managers and facility personnel identify, evaluate, and prioritize water-saving projects. Before we begin talking in more detail about water-efficient practices outdoors, I'd like to open the floor to any questions about WaterSense and the Hotel Challenge.
Now remember that all attendees are muted to reduce background noise during this presentation, so if you do have any questions, please type them into that chat box at the right of your screen, and we'll address them as they are received. So it looks like we don't have any questions at this time, but if any come up, you can still feel free to enter them at any point. Now, Tara, let's cover the landscaping best management practices.
Thanks, Laura. As many of you have probably experienced, outdoor water use can be significant at your hotel, especially if you have an irrigation system. So I'm excited to share some best practices with you for using water efficiently outdoors. First, let's talk about how you may be using water outdoors at your hotel. To maintain landscape aesthetic, you may have an in-ground irrigation system. In addition, some of you may have outdoor ornamental water features like fountains and ponds. And many of you probably have pools and spas. Water can be lost there from evaporation, leaks, and splashing, and water is used for filter cleaning and to control mineral buildup. Let's dig right into landscaping first. A well-designed landscape will minimize any supplemental water needed from your irrigation system. The principal components of a water-efficient landscape are healthy soils with appropriate grading, mulches, regionally appropriate plant choices, appropriately sized turf areas, and hydro zones. I'll cover each of these principles on the next few slides as we first discuss water-efficient landscaping operation and maintenance practices, and then potential landscaping retrofits and replacements. A first step in ensuring you properly operate and maintain your landscape is to hire a landscape professional trained and certified in water efficient or climate appropriate landscaping. Service and maintenance agreements should incorporate your water efficiency goals and requirements. Your soil is the foundation of your landscape. Healthy soils help develop deep plant root systems and allow water to properly infiltrate. Maintain good topsoil that captures precipitation as it falls and releases water back to plants over time. Poor or fast-draining soils, such as clay or sandy soils, can benefit from soil amendments to attain proper water holding capacity. Adding mulch to plant beds keeps soils cool and minimizes evaporation. Organic mulches can also add nutrients to the soil as they decompose. If parts of your landscape undergo regular foot traffic, be sure to aerate those areas regularly to improve the water infiltration. You also want to maintain your existing plantings. Weed your landscape so that water is available for the decorative landscape that you actually want. Raise the blades on your mower to allow grass to grow longer, which promotes deeper root growth and more drought-resistant turf. Take advantage of shaded areas by applying less water to those spots. If you need ornamental water features, or there are times of year when they can be turned off, turn them off to reduce evaporation losses. Recirculate any water flowing through these fountains, ponds, waterfalls, or other water features as much as you can. And finally, make sure you sweep sidewalks, driveways, pool decks, and any other hardscapes instead of using water to wash these areas down. When it comes to retrofitting or replacing your landscape, the actions you can take are very similar. The goal is to increase the landscape's water holding capacity and decrease runoff. Ideally, a landscape should be designed with water efficiency in mind from the start. A licensed landscape architect or qualified landscape designer can help. If you're considering retrofitting or replacing your landscape, here are some things to consider. First, you want to properly prepare your site. Keep all native vegetation and soils, and try to minimize soil compaction during the construction phase. If possible, avoid including steep slopes in your landscape design. Appropriately graded sites with gentle slopes allow water to stay where it is applied instead of running off. If the slopes can't be avoided, install plants with deeper root zones to provide stabilization and prevent erosion. Ensure that soil is properly amended tilled, and contoured to hold water in the root zones. If you use drought-tolerant and climate-appropriate plantings and materials, you may not need to apply as much supplemental irrigation to maintain your landscape quality. These plants can require less time and costs to maintain as well. Smaller turf areas can reduce resources and costs associated with watering, mowing, and fertilizing. Avoid strip grass entirely since it's difficult to water without overspray. You can also install shade trees since shading reduces watering requirements of covered plants. Consider soil type, exposure to sun and wind, and grading when planting. Your landscape should be designed by grouping plants according to their water needs to promote efficient irrigation in those zones that do not require supplemental water. If you have a graded area, consider installing rain gardens to capture stormwater runoff appropriately. In general, various studies have reported savings ranging from 18 to 50% from converting landscape plants with high water requirements to those with lower water requirements. Also keep in mind that more water-efficient landscape can provide ancillary benefits by reducing the need for maintenance, fertilizer application, and fuel use. This wraps up our discussion on landscaping, but before we move on to discuss irrigation, we'd like to take a quick poll of the audience and take any questions you may have.
Now the question should be appearing on your screen, so please reply when you see it. We'd like to just get an idea of how many facilities currently have drought-tolerant or climate-appropriate plants. And while you're waiting for the poll results to come in, just please type any questions you might have into the chat box at the right of your screen.
All right, you guys must be excellent students today. We have no questions still.
Yeah, no questions yet. So we're going to go ahead and close the poll, and it looks like most of you have these types of drought-tolerant, climate-appropriate plantings, but you still need to use irrigation. So that's good to know. Thanks for sharing.
And now we'd like to invite Holly to discuss water-efficient irrigation. Holly?
Yeah, thanks, guys. Now that Tara has discussed how to ensure that your landscape is going to require the least supplemental water possible, let's discuss how to efficiently irrigate it when necessary. And it sounds like from the poll results, a lot of you are still irrigating, so I think this section will be really relevant to you. Experts estimate that up to 50% of water used for irrigation is lost due to wind, evaporation, and overwatering. And poor irrigation system design, improper system installation, lack of maintenance, and improper scheduling can be the contributing factor to those water losses. The best practices that we'll cover today will hopefully help you avoid some of these common issues. One of the most important concepts associated with irrigation system efficiency is distribution uniformity, or DU, and that's how evenly water is applied over the landscape. In the image shown here on this slide, the landscape on the top has good uniformity, and you can tell by the water application depth that all parts of the landscape are receiving roughly the same amount of water. And then the landscape on the bottom, the distribution uniformity is poor. Some parts of the landscape are receiving more water than others. And landscapes with poor DU are often watered to keep the driest spot green, over-irrigating the other areas. And you may not realize that overwatering can damage landscapes even more than underwatering. To best address irrigation water use, you may want to start by hiring a qualified irrigation professional. WaterSense labels certification programs which test irrigation professionals on water-efficient techniques and technologies. Hiring an irrigation professional certified through a labeled program can ensure that your irrigation system is designed, operated, and maintained with water efficiency in mind. When hiring an irrigation professional, you'll want to consider which type of certified professional you may need for the job at hand. Designers can design a water-efficient irrigation system, creating zones with similar watering requirements, ensuring head-to-head coverage, and selecting the right type of spray device for each part of your landscape. Installation and maintenance professionals, which are sometimes simply called irrigation contractors, may install the system that was laid out by the designer. They may also manage your system, performing tasks like weatherizing it for the off-season, checking for leaks and overspray upon startup, replacing broken heads throughout the season, setting your controller schedule and adjusting it, and other maintenance items. And then irrigation auditors audit irrigation systems, and your system can be audited after installation to ensure the installed system meets the design intent. You probably also want to ensure your system is audited periodically. Auditors will suggest ways to maximize your DU and point out needed areas of maintenance and schedule improvements that can help you. Although you can design, install, and repair an irrigation system so that it's optimized for water efficiency, the end driver of water use is your irrigation schedule. Irrigation schedule should be updated monthly to account for changing weather conditions. Your landscape will need less water in the spring and fall months than the high peak of summer. If you don't have a controller that adjusts the schedule for you, and we'll talk about those controllers in a second, you'll want to make sure that you do it yourself. If you have steep slopes or clay soils, any landscape where it's hard for water to get to the root zone efficiently, you want to make sure to schedule your irrigation events so that less water is applied more frequently. This offers less chance for runoff on those areas. And in general, on gently sloped landscapes with soil that's easy to penetrate, it's better to apply larger volumes of water less frequently to encourage deep root growth. Irrigation zones should be scheduled individually based on your zone's watering needs, and you'll want to consider exposure to sun, wind, plant type, soil type, and your sprinkler type when determining what the schedule should be for each zone. And if you see any pooling or puddling on your landscape, check for a leak in your irrigation system. As I mentioned earlier, you should audit your irrigation system periodically, approximately every 3 to 4 years, to identify system deficiencies. And throughout the irrigation system, check for and fix broken sprinkler heads, spray that might be landing on hardscapes, and of course look for any leaks. If you have water meters installed on your irrigation system specifically, you'll want to read them at least monthly and analyze water use trends. Your annual water use should form a bell curve with the highest irrigation use in the summer months, and that will indicate that you're adjusting your schedule appropriately to account for seasonal climate changes. If you don't have a dedicated irrigation meter installed, you might want to go ahead and install one since you can't manage what you don't measure. Now let's talk about ways to retrofit your existing system to reduce your irrigation water use. Since your irrigation schedule dictates your water use, you could first consider replacing your existing timer-based controllers with demand-based controllers. Weather-based irrigation controllers adjust your irrigation schedule based on local weather factors. Soil moisture sensors and rain sensors will bypass irrigation when it isn't needed. And wind and freeze sensors will also override scheduled waterings if weather conditions aren't right. Weather-based irrigation controllers are currently eligible for the WaterSense label, and WaterSense is working on a specification to label soil moisture sensors. You can also optimize your irrigation system hardware to help you use less water. Consider installing drip irrigation around trees, shrubs, and plant beds. These emission devices deliver water at the root zone, so less water is lost to evaporation and wind. You may also want to consider replacing your sprinkler heads with more efficient heads, like pressure-regulating heads and matched precipitation, or multi-trajectory rotating heads. And as I mentioned, or as I guess Tara mentioned earlier, WaterSense is working on a specification for landscape irrigation sprinklers. If you do replace heads, make sure there's head-to-head coverage, and that is water from one spray head is reaching but not spraying past surrounding spray heads. This will help you improve your DU. And the image on this slide provides an illustration of this concept. If you're thinking about replacing your system or installing a new system, you want to consider working with a certified irrigation professional. Throughout design, you want to aim for a DU of at least 65%, place plants with similar watering needs together, and consider other site conditions that affect watering needs. You want to consider installing water-efficient emission devices, demand-based controllers, and other sensors. In addition, you could consider installing flow rate monitoring equipment, and that can help interrupt irrigation if excess flow is detected. That can really help you avoid losing water to leaks. So if the system sees that there's an excess water flowing, it can immediately cut that off, and you won't even have to see the pooling or puddling to make the decision to stop irrigating. If available and allowed by your local water codes, consider using alternative water sources such as reclaimed water for your landscape watering. And your biggest savings potential is going to be from setting an appropriate irrigation schedule once your system's optimized. I've mentioned that several times. And this image can show how much you can save by changing your irrigation schedule based on plant needs. The blue horizontal line towards the top of the graph shows you how much you may irrigate if you set your irrigation schedule and you don't adjust it throughout the year. So you're watering the same amount every month regardless of the weather. And the orange line shows what the plant actually needs. This line, as I mentioned earlier, forms a bell curve showing that the plant's highest watering needs occurs in the warmest summer months. If you adjust your schedule to account for plants' actual needs, you can save a significant amount of water, illustrated by that dark blue shaded area between the dark blue line, which is your set schedule, and the orange curve, which is your plant's needs. And here are some savings you may see by replacing your system hardware. A properly installed WaterSense labeled weather-based irrigation controller may reduce your irrigation water use by 15%. Using drip on trees, shrubs, and plant beds can use 50% less water than conventional sprinkler systems. And water-efficient sprinkler heads can reduce water use by as much as 30% compared to standard pop-ups. Remember that if you replace components of your irrigation system, you should adjust your irrigation schedule for that zone to account for the changes.
Great, thanks Holly. Now let's take just another quick break for any questions you may have for Holly on irrigation best management practices, and also to take another poll. So for this poll, we are interested in learning how many of you are already using weather-based irrigation controllers or soil moisture sensors. And if you have any questions, please just enter those into the chat box of your GoToWebinar panel. Okay, great. So it looks like the majority of you with irrigation systems are using weather-based irrigation controllers. And there's also some timer-based controllers out there as well. Thanks for your responses. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Holly to discuss water efficiency in pools and spas.
All right, great. No questions so far. It looks like you're a quiet
Oh, wait.
group.
So actually, we did just get a question from Sarah. So Sarah is wondering, are these weather-based irrigation controller systems also called smart irrigation systems? I've heard that term before and was wondering if they are one and the same.
Yes, smart irrigation controllers sort of encompass the weather-based irrigation controllers, soil moisture sensors, really any sensor that is capturing weather or on-site data to adjust your irrigation schedule.
So the weather-based irrigation controller is one type that fits within the larger category of smart irrigation systems, Sarah. But it looks like we don't have, one more question. So Andrew's wondering, where does the 15% reduction come from?
Okay, that actually, there are a variety of studies I think that were averaged together to get that number, and to find the source for that, you can either look in WaterSense at Work, and if you want to actually send an email to the helpline after this, we can point out the exact page number. It's in the irrigation VMP, which I believe is section 5.2 or 5.3. Or you could look at in the weather-based irrigation controller specification supporting statement, and that is a document where we sort of document all the rationale for anything we include in any of our specifications, and that is on the WaterSense website with the weather-based controller specification. So either of those places can help you find that.
Great, thanks Holly. So I think we can go ahead and move on to pools and spas.
All right. So as Tara mentioned earlier in the presentation, water can be lost from your pool or spa through evaporation, leaks and splashing, filter cleaning, and mineral buildup control. To minimize water loss from evaporation, you don't want to heat your pool above 79 degrees, and be sure to use pool covers or liquid barriers whenever your pool is not in use. Physical covers can also prevent debris from entering your pool, which in turn can lead to reduced water usage from filter backwashing. And since you use water to clean that filter media, you want to clean it only when necessary, when it's not operating effectively, instead of on a set schedule. If you have one, you want to use a sight glass to monitor the visual quality of the backwash water running through the filter and determine when backwashing is complete, rather than backwashing for a predetermined set amount of time. And if you set your pool water level several inches below the edge, you can eliminate some of that water loss to splashing. To control mineral buildup, you want to maintain proper pH, alkalinity, and hardness levels in your pool water. This can avoid the need to drain your pool or add excess makeup water. If you do have to drain your pool, only do a partial drain if you can, and consider reusing that drain water for other purposes, maybe like filling those ornamental water features you may have. To check for leaks, you want to actively monitor your pool's water level. If your pool loses more than 2 inches per week or 3 inches if you're in a drier or more arid region of the country, that could be the sign of a leak. And if you are anticipating you might have a leak, or just as a good practice, you want to periodically inspect your pump seals, pipe joints, filtration system lines, pool liners, any other areas around your pool or in the operational area where leaks may be common. And obviously repair any of those leaks as soon as they're identified, because they are really big water wasters. If you're looking to retrofit your pools and spas or replace them entirely, there are a few things you can consider. Install wind barriers like fences, walls, or hedges around your pool to reduce wind movement and therefore evaporation and water loss. Definitely install and use a pool cover even if you have an indoor pool. Install a pool filter pressure gauge that can tell you when filter cleaning is needed based on pressure differentials, and also consider installing a pool filter sight glass. If you're replacing your filter system, discuss the best type of filter for the size of your pool with your pool vendor. Generally, cartridge filters are best for small pools, sorptive media filters for medium-sized pools, and industrial filters for larger pools. You could also consider installing a reverse osmosis system to control the concentration of dissolved solids. That could prolong the useful life of your pool water and reduce the number of times you may have to drain it. A conductivity controller system can monitor the buildup of dissolved solids so that at a predetermined level, a portion of the pool water can be drained and replaced rather than the entire volume. To monitor for leaks, you can install a water meter on your makeup line to the pool and read it regularly. Look for leaks if the meter shows any abnormally high water readings. And installing a pool gutter and grate system along the perimeter of your pool can mitigate some of that drag out and loss during pool use. And it's hard to estimate savings for some of these practices, but in general, using physical pool covers can reduce evaporation losses by 30 to 50%, and those liquid barriers can reduce it by 10 to 30%. In addition, replacing sand or sorptive media filters with cartridge filters, where appropriate, can save between 68 and 98% of backwash water. And the details and stats for where those numbers are backed up are also located in our WaterSense at Work document.
Great. Thanks, Holly. Now let's take a break to see if anyone has questions about pool and spa material section. And another poll will also be showing up here as well, and that's asking, how does your pool facility use a pool cover when your pool is not in use? So Holly, we do have a question while the poll is going. Jeff wants to know, how much reject water are you going to have if you use reverse osmosis?
Oh, that's a good question. A good RO system will typically have a 1-to-1 ratio of permeate to reject. So whatever you're pushing through that system, you'll be wasting pretty much an equal quantity.
Okay, great. And Rondra wants to know, are there any highly recommended liquid pool covers?
Actually, on the RO system question, I do want to mention that the reject from that RO could also potentially be used somewhere else on site. I've seen facilities use reject water even as makeup to their cooling tower because although it is a little bit more concentrated than the permeate that's coming out, it's not that significant that it would increase your cycles too much. And you may be able to use that reject for some of your ornamental water features or irrigation or some other things too. So I don't want to say that that's a completely wasted water source. And what was the next question was about liquid barriers?
Just recommended liquid pool covers.
We don't actually like to recommend specific manufacturers or exact products, so I can't really speak to that, unfortunately.
Okay, great. And if you have any other questions, you can feel free to enter them. But we've got our poll results showing, and it looks like there's a 40-60 split in terms of it, but the majority lies with those who don't use a pool cover. So thanks for that information.
Good. So hopefully everyone learned a little from this. Then I think using that pool cover is a great opportunity for those that aren't already doing that.
I agree, Holly. So now I'd like to introduce Richard Restuccia, who is with ValleyCrest Companies, Inc., to discuss his project at the resort at Pelican Hill.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And I want to say thank you for the great information on irrigation. I thought that was really valuable. I also want to say thank you for making us a part of this presentation today. I think that what this shows is the partnerships that are being established throughout the country when it comes to water savings. And I think those partnerships are really valuable as we move forward in trying to reduce water waste. And I think the resort at Pelican Hill is a great example of that as well, where we've got a partnership between the end user customer, Pelican Hill, the water agency, Irvine Ranch Water District, the contractor, ValleyCrest, and now the EPA. And I think moving forward, the synergies that are created from these partnerships will reduce water waste and really do a lot to make a dent in this this battle we're fighting against against water waste and for water conservation. So thanks very much. So speaking of waste, let's not waste any more time, and let's jump into the presentation here on Pelican Hill. Pelican Hill is a beautiful resort on the Newport coast in Southern California. It has over 100 acres of landscape, and all those landscape grounds are irrigated. And it's in the middle of 50,000 acres of preserved land that was that's called the Irvine Ranch, that was donated by the Irvine Company. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of focus on green and sustainable programs there and practices as a result of the of the preserved land. So recently, Pelican Hill earned the Forbes 5-star rating, and this was for the second year in a row. And it also won the #1 resort in the U.S. rankings by Condé Nast Travel Magazine. Now, the reason I think that's so important is because a lot of people have the concept that if you're going to be green and sustainable, you might sacrifice in beauty, aesthetic, and resort feeling. And I think these are great awards and recognition that show that you can be green and sustainable and still be beautiful. So we had the benefit with Pelican Hill to start looking at irrigation and sustainable practices right from the construction phase. And so this started, pre-2009 in the construction. And at that time, we wanted to stick with the EPA guidelines, or their concept, their great concept, to assess and then change and then track your changes. So for an assessment, instead of assessing what we were doing, we looked at other jobs that we did, other resorts we did. We said, well, it could be some best management practices that people like the EPA are recognizing as best management practices, as well as the IA and others. And how can we apply these to the resort? So we were able to do this from the get-go, which was a big advantage to not have to go in and retrofit later. So the three things we really focused on, and the three things we're going to focus on for this presentation, are the irrigation system, the plant palette, and then also the water budget. Because once again, as we've already heard, you can't really manage what you don't measure, and having a water budget and tracking it regularly is really a key to all these processes. So on the next slide, we're going to see a picture of the resort here, and in that first picture there in the top left-hand corner, you see that we do have some turf installed, and I think the key to turf, because it's such a volatile subject, right? When we talk about turf replacement or pulling turf out, people get very emotional about this. And as we heard from Holly earlier, it's thinking about being how much on a scalable size. How much turf are you using? So at Pelican Hill, we stuck to about 6 to 8%. We wanted to use it in essential areas. There's an area where they do weddings. When they have turf there, there's areas where they have some meeting grounds, and people are going outside to take breaks and have some meals and have some interaction. And we wanted to keep turf in those sites as well. But really, 6 to 8% we felt was not a whole lot, but at the same time, it didn't compromise the aesthetic of the resort. So we thought that was really, really good and really important. And then the other thing, we used drought-tolerant plants around the turf, and made sure, as was mentioned earlier about hydrozoning, made sure that the turf was on one irrigation valve or one irrigation setting, and the drought tolerance were on a separate. And that was critical. We also had the ability and do use recycled water on about 90% of the landscape. Anytime we're closer to guest rooms, we don't use the recycled water there. We also were able to install some cisterns that caught or catch rainwater coming off the buildings, and then once those cisterns are filled, or every 10 days, because we don't want that water sitting in those cisterns too long, we move that to, there's a golf course adjacent to the resort, and that water is used to irrigate the golf course as well. And then one other thing that really became important to water savings at Pelican Hill was the establishment of microzones for their trees. Trees are often the most valuable landscape asset that these resorts have, and it's critical, I think, to water your trees separate from your turf and shrubs and other plants. And what we often see on properties that we go on is we see that the trees get the same amount of water or same watering schedule as turf, and that's really not very healthy for your trees, and it's not a very efficient use of landscape water either. So we set up microzones for the trees, and they were really important, especially in the watering in period when the trees were first planted, and then to have separate deep watering for the trees and separate zones for your turf so you could water your turf a little bit more often, but didn't have to go as deep. And you'll see we get a tremendous water savings as a result of doing this with the trees. And then finally, we had to pay attention to our water budget, and the water budget that the Irvine Ranch Water District established is very similar to the EPA's water budget tool. And I think these are so important because I think for the most part, people don't have a very good idea of how much water they should be using, and sometimes they don't know very accurately, how much water they are using. So with Irvine Ranch Water District, we get a monthly allocation of water, and we measure, we read our meters weekly. And once again, we've got separate meters for the landscape irrigation. So we read those meters weekly and then plug them into the water budgeting tool that Irvine Ranch Water District has. And we see and we can monitor through the month if we're ahead or below our allocation. And this really does help to make sure that we're doing the correct job and staying on task with the water. It helps identify any problems that you may have as far as leaks. These things are quickly detected, and it just cuts down on the amount of water waste as a result of that as well. So sticking to your water budget and knowing what that is and measuring against it is so valuable and so important as we go through and try to manage water efficiently. So on the next slide, the next thing we looked at was the use of smart controllers. And at Pelican Hill, we installed WeatherTrack smart controllers that are manufactured by HydroPoint. We've done this on some other resorts as well, Fess Parker up in Santa Barbara, the Princess Resort over in Phoenix, Arizona, or a couple others, just to name a few. And we've had a lot of success in using smart controllers to manage water efficiently. We typically are seeing about a 20 to 25% reduction in water use as a result of using a smart controller. I was listening earlier, and I love some of those questions that were coming in about smart controllers. And you think about a traditional controller. This is one that we all have used in the past, and we know that they work when they come on at a certain time. They run for a specified amount of time and then shut off. And so then I get the question a lot of times is, well, what makes a controller smart? I really think there's 5 things that you need to make a smart controller. And the controllers that we installed in Pelican Hill do all 5 of these. And number 1, it has to adjust based on ET, or soil moisture sensing. ET, or evapotranspiration. I learned this definition this week from a friend of mine, Mike Barron at Toro. And he said, think of evapotranspiration as the opposite of rain. Instead of what's entering the soil and hitting your plants, it's the opposite. It's what's evaporating from your soil and what your plants are transpiring or using. So very interesting. So we can measure this on a daily basis, and we know that soil, we like to saturate soil to 100% soil moisture, and then measure ET and see how much water is depleted every day until you deplete down to a 50% measurement in your soil saturation, and then we'd like to fill it up to 100% again. And when you do that, and do that consistently over time, this is when you get the most healthy, vibrant landscapes you can imagine. So a lot of times people think, I'm going to cut back on water, but my landscape's going to suffer as a result, and that's not the case that we're finding at all. What we find is that your plants look a lot more healthy as a result of the proper irrigation. And as Holly mentioned earlier, overwatering is actually one of the biggest cause of plant diseases and health problems. So number 1 is for those smart controllers that they adjust daily to weather conditions or soil moisture conditions. Number 2, I think it's really important to be able to access your controllers through a computer, a tablet, iPad, or smartphone. Something so that you don't have to go out and look at that controller every day to see what's happening with your water. Right? If you think about the labor, the fuel, the time wasted to go out and look at every controller, can be quite extensive. Instead, if you can look at it on your computer from one centralized location, You're going to be a lot more efficient. You're going to do it more regularly. You're going to actually have a tool that you can use to manage water that way instead of having to travel out and see those controllers. Number 3 is flow sensing. And this becomes really important because oftentimes when you don't have flow sensing, don't have a smart controller, breaks occur, and oftentimes we're irrigating properties at night when no one's around or early in the mornings, and oftentimes a break or leak can occur and it's not detected for several days. And so the waste just keeps on accumulating more and more. So flow sensing basically looks at a normal cycle run during regular run time, and then it compares future runs of irrigation to that. And when it senses high flow, or even when it senses low flow, right, detecting a very minor leak, it'll shut the system off and then do what I call number 4 now, and that is send you an alert that tells you you have a problem with one particular zone. We're not going to turn it on until you clear this fault, and when you clear it means you've taken care of the problem and we can start irrigating efficiently again. And then finally, the last thing I like to say makes a controller smart is the ability to generate reports. Once again, if we're going to be intelligent managers, we have to have data, and if I'm using flow sensing, I can generate reports on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, and I can compare water use to past months, past years, past weeks. I can export these reports to PDF files, I can email them easily, and I can start to have intelligent discussions around water when it comes to my property. And once again, when I can start to have those intelligent conversations, that's when I start to be a real efficient water manager. So anyway, that's our use of smart controllers at Pelican Hill. So next is looking at post-construction water savings opportunities, because we have to remember this water conservation, water management really is an endless horse race, right? What used to be, water used to be very plentiful and not very expensive, and it's getting scarce now, and it's getting more and more expensive every day. So I think of water management almost as the endless horse race, something we have to be continually looking to improve. So we did the construction and completion of construction in 2009 at Pelican Hill, but it doesn't mean that we stop looking for opportunities to continue to improve. And the areas that we saw that were real low-hanging fruit or easy to change were, we decided to evaluate our irrigation. Technology continues to change and get better in irrigation, so we had to look for improvements we could make there. We had to look at plant conversions, right? Sometimes you pick a drought-tolerant or perennial, and maybe because of soil conditions, maybe because of some things that you just couldn't determine, they're not doing as well. So we had to look at that as well. Mulching practices, it's part of the best management practices, and you have to evaluate, based on rain and other weather, foot traffic, how often to replenish your mulch. So that's something else you need to look at. And then just how often are you doing a preventative maintenance inspection? Regularity of this is really key, right? And if you allow time to pass, things on your irrigation system can get out of adjustment. They can start to clog. You can start to have problems. So you want to evaluate that as well. And then finally, your water meter readings. And this is so important, I think, to have sub-meters in your irrigation system so that you know exactly what you're using for landscape. And the other thing I know is I travel around the country and work with a lot of customers. Oftentimes what you're paying for a sewer rate on your water is equal to what you're paying for your water. And so on landscape irrigation, we don't have to pay that sewer rate. And oftentimes, we can cut your water bill in half just by installing a sub-meter and showing the water agency that you are using a sub-meter. This is landscape irrigation. I'm not paying that sewer fee. So it's one of the few times I can actually guarantee, a 50% reduction in your bill when we do that. So water meter readings get to be very important. So on the next slide, you'll see, one of the first things we did was install some rotating nozzles in the turf areas. Rotating nozzles are some relatively new technology. All the manufacturers are starting to make them now and sell them. And what the high efficiency nozzles do is they apply water at a little bit slower of a rate, but at the same time they throw a heavier water droplet. And thus what happens is that the water ends up going where you want it instead of misting and blowing away. We learned that a lot of the water that we're applying is wasted, and a lot of that is through mist and pressure. So you get a heavier droplet, it goes where you want it to go, and because it's being applied at a little slower rate, you don't have as much of a runoff issue. So we switched out to some rotating nozzles in our turf areas. We work on a monthly preventative maintenance inspection where we turn the system on and make adjustments on a very regular basis. As I mentioned, we're doing the weekly meter readings and putting that information into Irvine Ranch Water District's website and being able to see if we're staying under or ahead of our monthly allocation of water. That helps us to really focus on proper water management techniques because we're getting immediate feedback to what we're doing. And then we continue to be on a very strict, regular mulching program. And mulch does a great job of reducing evaporation in the soil and also cutting down on weeds. We also did a little bit of extra conversion of some spray areas to drip. And at Pelican Hill, we're using drip emitters on polyflex risers and eliminating any spaghetti tubing that is in the landscape. And we found that this has done a couple things. One, using drip especially by any of the guest room windows, it's cut down on window washing. It's cut down on maintenance as well. And I think it's important to remember is that as you apply good water management practices, you're able to reduce labor oftentimes as well, and pollution as a result of the labor. So I know oftentimes we look at the return on investment of a water savings technology, but I think it's important too that we look at things like labor savings as well, because I think that all does enter into the equation. So speaking of savings and return on investment, I think on the I just want to also mention that you can see on this one picture here on this slide on 45 is a before picture of the bougainvillea that we had planted in about 450 pots around the property, a lot of them around the pool. These bougainvillea are a drought-tolerant plant, but because they were in the pots, we found that we were having to water them a little bit more regularly than we thought was appropriate or wanted. And so I think on the next slide here, on the same slide, but you'll see an after picture of the bougainvillea. And you can see that we pulled out 450 of these the pots and planted succulents in them as well. I think we got a very nice aesthetic from it, and at the same time, great water savings as well. So, that really helped us there. Okay, so then on the next slide, we're going to see the actual water savings that we had. And from 2009 to 2010, we actually experienced a 37% water savings in dollars. And that equated to about $75,000 saved. Now, it's important to remember that we use recycled water at 90% of Pelican Hill. So if we were paying regular water rates, we'd probably be saving about twice this much. So we pay about half the price for recycled water as we do regular water. So many times, if you're not using recycled water, savings can even be much higher. The 37%, is I think a really big number. A couple things I just want to point out that attributed to that. ET values in 2010 versus 2009 were about 7% less. So we did get a little break on the weather there, but it's only about a 7% break. And then the other two things I want to mention is that the microzones we use for the trees, when you first plant your trees, you're using a lot more water, and so that was a natural cutback. And as a lot of people pointed out to me, what we had to spend to establish those microzones, we quickly made up the second year in the water savings when we cut back the water to those trees, and once again, we've got some really great, beautiful trees on the property, and really adds to that resort aesthetic and that whole experience you get while you're on the property. So felt that was very valuable and paid off very quickly. And then the other thing I just want to mention is that, smart controllers, they really aren't a set it and forget it tool, and it takes a while. It takes some time to fine tune them, and once again, I think it's important to think of them as a tool to manage water. So as you're using your smart controllers, the first year and into the second year, you probably start to see, even better water savings as you get to better understand the efficiency or uniformity of your system, and ways you can adjust your controller to best match the uniformity of your system. So a couple things to pay attention to, and just remember that smart controllers aren't a set it and forget it solution, but a tool to manage water, and that's really what's critical. The other thing that we saw, Holly talked about the bell-shaped curve in water use, and typically what we do see is in the fall we see the biggest water waste, and I think oftentimes why this happens is that we turn irrigation up in June and July and August, and then as we get into the fall, the days oftentimes still stay, very warm in Southern California, but we're finding out that, learning that daylight hours make as much of a difference, if not more, than actual temperatures, and the cooler temperatures at night really affect ET as well. So typically what people do is turn the irrigation up in June, July, August, and it stays on because the days stay warm, and they don't make that adjustment down. But your smart controller does make that adjustment for you, and we really saw some big savings, especially in October. We saw a 40% reduction, and then in December, we had 47% reduction. So these seem to be our best water savings months. So, once again, that made us very happy that to know that our expectation in our assessment after we made our changes and tracked what happened were actually the result. And then, the landscape has won a Planet Award, a National Planet Award. So once again, a confirmation of saving water and being sustainable doesn't mean you have to forfeit aesthetics or beauty. And then finally, we have met the Irvine Ranch Water District's water requirement. We've been 100% in compliance, and are really, I think the other thing that's important about this is, so look at the water budgeting tool from the EPA or Irvine Ranch water budget allocation. I really find that they're fair, and I think that's really important because, once again, I feel like these agencies are working with us to save water. We're bringing focus, but it's a fair focus, and we've really stayed about, on average, 20% below our allocation. So, and kept the landscape looking great. So I appreciate the fairness and once again the partnership to bring a focus to this so that we can be good water managers. So that's everything I had.
Wow.
We do have some time for questions.
Yeah, we do. Thank you so much for that great presentation, Richard. It's so good to hear right from the source. So we already have a few questions for you, but please keep the Richard questions coming. So first, Marianne wants to know, what recycled water sources are used at Pelican Hill? Is it condensate, blowdown, municipality reclaim?
Or something else.
Or something else.
Yeah, so it's reclaim that's coming from the municipality.
Okay, so it's not directly going from the hotel guest room facilities to the outdoor areas.
That's correct.
Yeah.
We do in the case of the rainwater, we do have the catchment for that and the cisterns, and we pump that to the golf course. But that's not part of when I say 90% of the properties being watered by recycled water. It's recycled water supplied by Irvine Ranch Water District.
Yeah, I don't know if you'd be able to call it a resort if you were going straight from for the gray water.
Right.
Great, thanks. And Morgan says, it sounds like Pelican Hill is working hard to be eco-conscious. Have you gone through any certification process to get recognition for your efforts, such as LEED, TripAdvisor, Green Leaders, etc.?
You know, I know that once again they are very good about promoting what they're doing on property, and I think as a result they're getting some recognition from, as I mentioned, Condé Nast and the Planet Awards. But the couple that were mentioned there, I don't know that they've applied or tried to get any recognition there, and probably a great, it's not probably, it is a great suggestion.
Yes, they are getting, especially the Green Leaders program is really taking off. I heard a couple weeks ago that they have 3,200 facilities signed up in the U.S., and now they're going global. So it's a good opportunity to get recognized for your efforts.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's a lot of people. I'm really happy to hear that number.
Yes. And it's actually exciting. It's set up in a similar way to LEED, where there's different levels of the, I believe it's a green, and then silver, platinum, and gold. So each one has specific information and a questionnaire that is verified, and it actually shows up next to the hotel's listing when you go to search for lodging. So it's a kind of a one-to-one, direct relationship of the information going to the consumers. So it's actually pretty cool, because you don't have to go look it up on another list. It's right there. So
neat. So Richard, Andrew would like to know, what's the peak ET demand at Pelican Hill, and do you set the smart controllers to 100% ET?
So I don't know what the peak ET is. I know on an annual basis, ET right there in that part of California sits at about 40 inches a year. And so with the HydroPoint controllers, you don't have to put in a baseline schedule. You put in things like emitter, device, the plant type, any slopes, shade or sun, and then the controller figures out the water cycle based on the ET, and then does water to the 100% of ET.
Wonderful. Are there any other questions? And if so, please type them into the chat box. All right, well, I believe that was our last question, and if there's any others that come in at the end, we can address them. But let's go ahead and review the webinar now. Tara?
Yes. Thanks, Richard. That was excellent. We really appreciate you coming on to speak and talk about the projects that you've been working on, especially as a great example of how a lot of these different principles come together. So that's really awesome. Let's review what we've covered today, because there's a lot of information in this presentation and a lot more in our best management practices at WaterSense at Work. So first, when you're implementing and maintaining a water efficient landscape, you can reduce your irrigation water requirements by up to 50%. You can ensure that your landscape requires the least supplemental water possible, and that's a great first step to saving water outdoors. When designing, installing, and maintaining and auditing your system, consider working with an irrigation professional certified through a WaterSense labeled program, since they do have the knowledge of all of the different water efficient products, as well as the landscape knowledge to go along with it. So replacing a timer-based irrigation controller with WaterSense labeled weather-based irrigation controllers can reduce your water use by approximately 15%. And keep your eye out for future outdoor labeled products. We're working on specifications for soil moisture sensors and landscape irrigation sprinklers. And finally, you can reduce your water losses from evaporation, splashing, and filter cleaning fairly easily by implementing water efficient operation and maintenance practices for pools and spas. So after all of this, what can you do right now? We wanted to give you all some really basic things that you could take and start using right now, and kind of just to get the ball rolling. So you can go and add mulch and topsoil where appropriate on the landscape and aerate the high traffic areas to really increase your soil's water retention and reduce those evaporation losses. You can allow your turf grass to grow a little higher, promoting deeper root growth and more drought-resistant turf. And the easiest way to reduce your water use for irrigation is to adjust your zone-by-zone schedules regularly to meet the plant's needs. And apply cycle and soak scheduling to steep slopes and clay soils while watering other landscapes less frequently with more volume at each watering. Also, you should check your sprinkler heads regularly to make sure that they're aimed appropriately at the landscape instead of hardscapes or other areas. And it goes without saying that you should fix any broken heads that you find. No one likes to have a gigantic water wasting geyser, as I believe they're called. We also encourage you, if you don't already have one, to install and read a water meter dedicated to the irrigation system, and that really does help you measure and manage the system properly because you have that individual system separated out. Also, for pools, you can control the temperature and use your cover or another liquid barrier to reduce evaporation losses, especially if the pool is outdoors. And you can consider altering your filter backwash plan to only clean filters when needed. So those are just some basics that you can take right now, and if you want more information, and there's a lot of detailed information on our website in the best management practices for WaterSense at work. So if you found this webinar helpful, please plan to join us for our other upcoming technical webinars. We've done several of them so far that are available on our website, and we are also doing several others in May, June, and July. So as you can see here, we're going to talk about our water use tool, and that actually will go through different methods that you can use to calculate the savings from different projects around a hotel property. So we made it to streamline with the portfolio manager system and Energy Star, and also to basically give you some really detailed information to help you prioritize the projects that may be that you could do at the facility. And then in June, we're also going to use basically talk about how to manage the water use in mechanical and HVAC equipment. And we have another excellent case study from a hotel in Atlanta that's going to be joining us. Then finally, we're going to talk about education and outreach and ways that you can discuss the amazing things that you're doing with your guests and with your employees, and how to help people change some of their behaviors while they're actually at the site and in the hotel, since we all know that behavior change is the most difficult and also can be the most water saving. And then finally, in I believe our last webinar in July, well, at least the last one for now, is actually going to be talking about best management practices for commercial kitchens. So all of these registration links are available on our website, on the WaterSense website /challenge that you see below. And as I mentioned, we are recording this webinar. This recording will go up with the other 3 that are there now. And those webinars were done basically in the last couple of weeks to tell people about the basics of the challenge, to talk about water assessments and how to calculate payback. And then we also went over some plumbing and laundry fixtures so that people could get an idea of what could be done with the actual guest use areas. So we'll be posting a recorded version of this webinar within the next few weeks so that you can all pass it along to your colleagues, or if you have other people that you think would be interested, we really encourage you to pass that along to them so that we can share the knowledge. And then finally, I just wanted to quickly let you know Energy Star is kicking off their 2014 Battle of the Buildings Challenge today, or actually I think it was yesterday. And this is a coast-to-coast competition amongst all types of commercial buildings to work off the waste and reduce the energy and water use across the board. So all commercial buildings can participate in this, and you can compete as a team or by individual building this year. So you can have a portfolio of buildings competing against a different portfolio or a competitor's portfolio if you'd like. So the baseline year is calendar year 2013, and the comparative period is 2014. And the registration is open right now, actually, and that goes from April 16th to the May 16th, and it will be on the Battle of the Buildings webpage. So Energy Star actually announced the 2013 winners yesterday and launched their 2014 competition yesterday as well. So you can check out the winners from last year and learn about the ways that you could change things this year. So we also worked with them to include water awards that each category is going to be recognized for saving energy and water. In terms of the in the right box that you see there, it says the top teams, the top buildings by type, 20% team reductions, and 20% building reductions. So we're really excited to have the water portions included along with energy, since we all know that those go together frequently. So the competitors use Portfolio Manager to enter buildings into the system and the competition. And on average in 2012, we have a stat here basically saying that the competition saved $25,000 on average for each participant and reduced energy use by 8% over the year during the competition period. So I encourage you guys to take a look at that if you're interested, and we'd really love to see some battles of water reductions going on. I think that's a great way to incorporate the challenge, our challenge on water as well as energy at the same time. And you also get a double award from EPA and Energy Star and WaterSense. So all up together. All right, so before we wrap up, we are still looking for a case study for some of our upcoming webinars. So in particular, we're looking for a hotel that would like to share their experience with commercial kitchen upgrades. So if you're interested in presenting a case study like Richard did today, please type a message into the chat box or contact our helpline so that we can get in touch with you. And then also, before we wrap things up, I'd like to conduct one last poll to see if you find the content in this presentation helpful, and if we, was the webinar useful? That's a good one.
Hopefully.
Hopefully you did. And it looks like for the most part people did, which is always good to know, instant feedback. All right, well, thank you for attending the presentation, and as we mentioned, the recording will be posted on the website for future listening, and we'll be emailing you when it's available. So feel free to pass this information along and to contact us if you have any other questions. And if you haven't already, please remember to take the Hotel Challenge Pledge on our website so you can receive the tools that we're offering to participants. So thank you for joining us, and we look forward to talking to you again on upcoming webinars. Have a great day.